Hi, hello, and welcome. My name is Hiba Mariam, and I welcome you all to Times Conversation. As you all must be aware, SRM University and institutions has been truly a trailblazer in global education. We have students coming from all across the globe to this wonderful place, and with the presence of wonderful leaders like one who I'm with talking today, SRM has truly found its place in the global education market. To talk to us more about this in detail, we have one such impeccable person who has over 25 years of excellence in academics and administration. Please join me in welcoming Professor A. Vinay Kumar, the Pro Vice-Chancellor of the Faculty of Science and Humanities, School of Law and Faculty of Management at SRM University, Kattankulathur. A warm welcome to you, sir. How you are doing today?
I'm doing quite fine, and thanks for inviting me. I think the conversation is going to be exciting, even for me.
Absolutely. So speaking about the legal age be going modern, the business age going modern, I think we'll have a lot of insights coming from you. So with that being said, let's get this wonderful conversation started because I can't wait to see what's in store. So sir, nowadays we are seeing students pursuing legal education, pursuing law, keeping in mind that the future is going to be very impeccable, very, very more demanding in the future. So where do you see legal education 10 years down the line?
Uh, we are up for a lot of transformation in education in general. In particular, law education is going to completely change. We foresee AI as a mainstream instrument which transforms legal education as we go along. But there are other technologies like emerging technologies like virtual reality, augmented reality, and a whole lot of other technologies that will completely impact the education sector and especially the legal education in a great way.
Yes, absolutely. So speaking about AI, like you had mentioned, ChatGPT is becoming like so common. Every student nowadays, they do their projects with ChatGPT, everything else goes right around that. So what is your take on implementing AI in legal courses and where do you think this will lead in the times to come?
So as of now, actually, the true impact of AI is not known to a lot of educational leaders. To be very honest, even I don't know how this is going to actually pan out in
Yeah.
the next 2 years and going forward in the next 10 years. But then we certainly see some drastic changes as we speak today. AI is used by almost all faculty members for understanding categories in a certain way. You can ask some questions to an AI platform, and then you get some very structured answers, which I think everybody is doing right now. But AI has more to do with more to it than merely asking questions and getting some structured answers. Now, AI, for instance, could actually, AI as we speak is actually collecting data from various sources and collating it and putting them into a cogent format for you to understand. But for instance, in AI, in legal education, for instance, AI has to enter classrooms in a certain way. But AI is not sort of a replacement in a certain way. I don't think AI is going to be a replacement for education or instruction in classrooms. AI is going to completely supplement the way we actually teach law courses and how do we actually make it more practical for students to understand and things like that.
Yeah, so I love how you mentioned about how AI can be used in the right way. But speaking of law, I think there are a few ethical considerations that we should keep in mind for using AI in the legal compliance format. So,
Absolutely.
what's your take on that, sir?
So AI, for instance, as of now, there's nobody to audit AI in the sense that the algorithms, the way the algorithms are actually structured, the way people are actually trying to build the AI systems, nobody is actually evaluating what is going in. Even for instance, how the AI platforms are getting trained with data. Now, if you have a lopsided training data, you will always have bias in the conclusions drawn by AI platforms. So we have some of these things already. We are encountering some of these biases in AI platforms. But legal education has this opportunity to actually evaluate how these algorithms are supposed to be audited.
Yeah.
What should be the way to basically understand whether something is equitable or not? Because more and more, when you use technology, the technology is going to transform things. But the right questions are, how do we understand the algorithms that shape the technology? And legal education has a huge role to play in making sure that there is a certain level of fairness in algorithms itself.
Yeah, speaking of that fairness, so do you think law schools in the modern world are complying with all these things and making sure that the upcoming lawyers are ready for this AI-driven world?
To be very honest, they are not ready because algorithms are not taught in law schools. Okay, so the technology is not taught to them in the way it is supposed to be taught. But then you need drastic curriculum changes to make sure that people have a fair understanding and fair depth in understanding of technologies and even at the level of algorithms. So that kind of a thing is going to come in legal education soon. It is coming in a sporadic way. For instance, all law graduates go through an AI sort of a AI for all kind of a course, but that's not sufficient.
Yeah.
Now look at this. AI algorithms, if you have to teach it, you have to teach it as though you are teaching a technology student. Now that kind of an integration is needed, and I'm sure that that transformation is going to definitely happen because we are going to go into world where algorithms are going to be contested in the court of law. So our graduates should be equipping themselves to understand algorithms. So you can't possibly ignore this. But as of now, these are like micro credits. People are doing short courses and trying to understand how this is supposed to be happening. But I think more depth is needed in curriculum.
Yes, so like I love how you highlighted the point of technology and law being very different, but today it's going very much hand in hand.
Yeah.
Do you think this merging of both together will lead to be a good thing or a bad thing? What's your take on that, sir?
It is not. It is neither good nor bad because it is a necessity. In other words, you can't possibly have a world without AI. Okay, you can't possibly have a world without courts or legal experts. So, in other words, the mergence is an inevitable consequence, right? And therefore, the future lawyers are supposed to be fairly well entrenched in the legal terminology. They need to have core skills of law, but they need to also have a fairly deep understanding about emerging technologies. Otherwise, you will not be able to survive in the future context that we are actually running into.
Yes, we have to go with the flow and make sure we
Absolutely,
are there to
absolutely.
stay because there's a mad race for everything. I think I love how you pointed that entire fact out. I have a very quick question for you, sir. So we spoke about the legal theory part, the technological theory part. What do you think are some of the most practical skills that the current lawyers need if they want to sustain in the law scene in the moment right now?
So, in other words, look at this. Usually, what happens is when technology takes over, you'll always have a lot of people falling behind the technology curve. There'll be some people who will catch up with technology, but there are a whole lot of others who are actually trying to catch up or cope up with technology. To give you an example, for instance, the aged still have a problem with how to use the mobile phone. Now they're using mobile phone in a very inefficient way, but they're still trying to figure out how do we actually sort of negotiate with the new technology. So you will always have that kind of a problem in the future too. There'll be a whole lot of people who will not understand technology, who will not understand algorithm, who will not understand fairness of algorithms and things like that. Therefore, the lawyer should make it compatible in the sense that the law graduates will have to communicate to them so that people understand it. One. Second thing is, how do they use these platforms? How do they use the legal experts in a certain way? And the new age lawyers are supposed to basically address these problems, and the communication itself has to change, right? And you can't, you'll be using a lot of jargon that a lot of people will not be able to understand. So you should make it compatible for them to understand, take them along, and just explaining cases to the clients itself is going to be a complex thing in the future. So communication is going to be a basic skill, but communication with this kind of an emphasis that how do you take the majority along? How do you make sure that people are understanding your language? Now that is going to be a challenge. That skill is needed, but there are other skills. Like for instance, in the case of India, you have a lot of case pendency. Okay, how technology is going to transform this? I'm sure AI is going to transform this space, because all initial work of researching the case and trying to make sure that how the case is supposed to be negotiated in a mutual platform, so that settlements can be reached and things like AI can play a huge role. But then ultimately it is lawyers who are going to make sure that the transaction happens and mediation happens, negotiations happen in a certain way, and settlements happen outside the court. And that is necessary because courts cannot solve the whole problem. Courts are not in the position to actually solve every case. So the alternate dispute resolution is going to be a very core skill for all lawyers, and especially mediation, negotiation, and things like that are going to be very important skills for the future lawyers.
Yes, and we really hope that they do take these baby steps and make them into the big steps that will bring them into this booming industry of the legal thing that is out there in the scene. So we spoke about different compliances, different problems that lawyers will be facing. But I think one major thing that they do face is when they do a degree from India. Settling in the global market or pursuing international law, or practicing international law becomes a little difficult for them. So what do you have to say about pursuing Indian law and then going out there? And how do you think we can curb all these hindrances?
So for instance, actually, as we speak, international trade is changing. US is now actually imposing tariffs on every nation, left, right, and center.
Okay.
And suddenly the World Trade Organization, which is supposed to be the global institution to negotiate all trade disputes and make sure that trade is facilitated and free trade is facilitated across the globe, now that has become irrelevant, because individual countries are basically making bilateral transactions and bilateral free trade agreements, and therefore a global trade agreement is irrelevant now. And then we also have a situation where there is a technology gap, in the sense that the developing countries have technology deficit, while the developed nations have the technology superiority. And technology is not transferred freely. No technology, nobody is going to transfer it. While commodities are transferred freely, technology barriers exist. So therefore, what happens is you will always have the problem of how do we negotiate settlements in the future, and then especially how do we get into dealing with individual countries. It's no more the entire world. It is actually how do you deal with individual countries. So the international law and the international order is going to actually change quite dramatically in the next 5 years. And the laws that we were following in the yesteryears probably are not going to be relevant in the future. So what do we do with? So in other words, the legal expertise is up for a huge change. The international law is going to change. Individual agreements are going to change. So therefore, you have to actually keep up with this change, which is going to be quite dramatic. So in other words, you need to understand the existing law, but you should also be quite practical about how things are changing as things are evolving right now.
So I think just being there in the picture and then just seeing how it goes, that really helped them to just go with the flow and sustain. That's what you want to try to saying, right?
Absolutely. The point is, the rules of the yesteryears are not going to hold anymore.
Yes.
So in other words, it is going to be a situation between two countries.
Yeah.
And when situations evolve between two countries and how that free trade agreement is going to come about, now based on which all your transactions are supposed to be evaluated. In other words, you're not dealing with one single free trade agreement, but a multiple set of free trade agreements. So a law graduate is supposed to understand not one, but maybe 200 different agreements, because there are 200 countries and 200 different agreements that you will enter into. And therefore, the complexity is going to be quite high.
100%. So they have to equip themselves to
Absolutely.
be in the field.
In other words, more reading, more nuance is needed, you know.
So speaking about more nuance and more reading, do you think the current modern world internship practices that lawyers do you think they are good enough to sustain in the long run for the current age, or what's your take on that, sir?
So already, our law graduates are supposed to get into internship every year. They are supposed to be working with some or the other, expert, legal expert, be it a company or an individual practitioner. Now that's already there. But the point is, but this is going to be a mainstay because every law school will actually now think about what type of internships are good for them, given the changing context. So in other words, it's not going to be one more routine internship. It's going to be what type of internship that you will do. What are those CV points that you will collect so that you become employable for the future? Because what worked in the yesteryears is not going to work now. So therefore, every law school is actually thinking about what type of international internship is needed. In fact, we are working on some international internships with a UK firm so that our students can go and work in UK environment, understand because we have a free trade agreement also with UK. So therefore, so international internships are going to become very important.
And it will change the
Absolutely.
dynamics of how the legal thing goes.
Even before they practice, I think a lot of our law graduates will have a fair understanding about the complexities of the trade and other things,
Yes, absolutely.
through internships.
Yes. So how do you think we can make this setup very inclusive in the modern digital world? So this thing of accessibility of international internships, how do you think we can make this accessible for the upcoming generation?
So, see, inclusivity is going to be a great challenge for us. I'm sure every institution would want to make sure that all graduates get a fair understanding about the complexities. But I don't think it's going to be a sort of a very equal kind of a situation because every internship opportunity is like a process where a company is actually selecting from among the students. So it's not going to be a sort of a thing. So in other words, all law graduates are supposed to be competing. There are enough opportunities, but it's not going to be a given thing in the sense that no law school can guarantee that you will get 10 internships in 10 different countries. That's not possible. You have to gear up yourself to be competitive enough to get those internships.
Yes, so it will surely get there. I think I have one more fun, tricky question for you right now to make the mood a little more lighter. So, from your expertise, from your experience in the entire field, if you had to add one new subject in the law curriculum, in the law, whatever it is, what would that one new subject be? And how do you think it will impact the students who are going to be upcoming lawyers and advocates?
So I see. In fact, there'll be many subjects. Of course, the some serious subjects include obviously how these free trade agreements are supposed to be incorporated into the curriculum. But actually, I think our law graduates should also have some fair amount of exposure to aesthetics. Okay, probably they should learn a little bit of music. Okay, or some other skill. Probably some kind of a cultural dance or something like that. Maybe Kathak or something like that, because it gives you a totally different type of a dimension when you are thinking. So if you only learn all law subjects and get stuck in the legal this thing, I think you will not be opening up. So therefore, I think the curriculum should have some aesthetics in it. Given a chance, I would probably include music and dance and something like that.
Yeah, that's a very Gen Z term to use of aesthetic, and I think I loved how you incorporated that. Law shouldn't just be serious, but it should be more of fun, because there's a lot of seriousness in the world already, and I think to just make it more, it'll just make it even worse. I think great thoughts that more law schools in the country should take. So we spoke about law in the modern world, sir, but business and entrepreneurship are also becoming like very common domains that students are choosing. So keeping in mind your expertise and your perspective, do you think law and business go hand in hand together?
In fact, actually, without law, you can't do business. You know, it's not easy to do business without understanding the nuances of law. In fact, law is one of the major courses in all business programs, and the skilling in law is an essential thing for entrepreneurs and also business managers.
Yes, absolutely. So speaking about just that, so business leaders nowadays, upcoming leaders nowadays, we have kids who are having their own startups. We have young people may having their own startups. Do you think where do you think this space for creating new business professionals comes, keeping in mind the booming law phase as well?
So right now, the business schools, there are traditional business
Yep.
schools all over the world, but actually there is no single curriculum that defines business education as of now.
Yep.
And everybody has actually, sort of reinvented their programs quite
Yeah.
dramatically.
Yeah.
There are some programs that emphasize entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
and there are some programs that sort of make sure that the program itself is going to create entrepreneurs, and while they get into entrepreneurship, they also get legal support, and there is an ecosystem within the business school that supports the entire process till they actually start a business. That kind of a completely integrated approach
Yep.
is already in place. And but then nobody has figured it out in a certain way that how do we make sure that we create a certain type of managers for the future, and we create a certain type of entrepreneurs, because the curriculum is still in that discovery phase in a certain way.
Yes. So with entrepreneurship also comes this very important term called leadership, and the current modules that business courses have. Do you think they have this entire scope of leadership within them that will make sure we give birth to more leaders in the future for the upcoming business era?
So essentially, when business education started, the we wanted managers as the managers were needed for large corporations. So leadership was taught in a certain way,
Yeah.
because they're supposed to manage a whole lot of a certain team, and then they needed certain leadership skills. And that traditional model of leadership is changing, because now the complexity has gone up. Even for managers, the business environment has changed quite dramatically. And there are disruptions, technology disruptions, new products, and there is a lot of innovation that is happening within the industry in a certain way. So in other words, there is a lot of ambiguity. Now leaders are supposed to deal with this ambiguity in a certain way, and even entrepreneurs are supposed to be dealing with huge ambiguity, because they don't know how things are supposed to be panning out. You may think that a certain technology works, but at the end of the day, the technology is actually not gaining traction. Then what do? How do you pivot? How do you sort of make sure that whatever that you have invented, whatever that you have innovated, that still is relevant for solving certain problems? So that kind of a dilemma, dealing with dilemmas, dealing with uncertainty, dealing with ambiguity, has become one of the key skill for leaders now. So business curriculums are trying to deal with that now.
Yeah. And do you think these problems can be caused? Can Let's cut that and re-go again. Do you think these problems can be solved with the help of AI like ChatGPT and other tools, sir? What's your take on that?
So AI, again, there's a lot of, to be very honest, hype about AI.
Yeah.
AI is already a business course, and every manager is getting trained in some kind of an AI tool. And now there is also this thing about, how do you sort of get into making sure that agents, the AI agents work for you in a certain way. It's called the agentic AI. Every business school is actually thinking about how do we introduce courses so that our business graduates have a sort of an edge in the AI, the new environment called the AI. But the basic this thing is we didn't. Very honestly, no business school has fully figured it out because the impact of AI is not known to a lot of industry sectors. It is impacting IT in a certain way right now, but we don't know exactly how it is going to actually sort of impact other sectors and what kind of dramatic changes that are going to happen. We don't know yet, but then the skilling is happening in a certain way.
Yes, that is the the modern take on it. But let's go back to the traditional take on it, sir. So back then we had traditional curriculums, traditional subjects to be there. But currently in the world, we're seeing more subjects like sustainability, ESGs up in in the business curriculum. So what's your take and opinion on bringing these new topics like sustainability and ESGs in the business curriculum,
So
sir?
already sustainability and ESG are part of every business curriculum.
Yeah.
There'll be, in fact, there are an entire specialization possibility
Yeah.
of sustainability, a whole gamut of sustainability courses in the MBA program. Already there are programs, MBA programs meant for sustainability launched by various business schools. Here at SRM, what we did was we basically sort of introduced some sustainability courses, okay? And the specialization is yet to come by, but the point is we are also working. How do we make sure that the business has become more sustainable and more environment friendly, more inclusive, and things like that? These cannot be ignored now, and a proper curriculum intervention is already done. But you need to have significant space for them in terms of achieving outcomes. Right now, the ESG employment is picking up, but then this is going to go up quite significantly in the future. So we will need more business graduates actually specializing in ESG. So in other words, you need to have a whole gamut of courses that will equip them to the new reality.
Yes, so like with more domains like ESG coming up and sustainability coming up, I'm sure there is this rush and competitiveness in the business industry already. So, how do you think what suggestions we should use to make sure that students are future ready to be in this high pressure, fast paced business world?
So firstly, I'll tell you, let's take the example of European business schools. In Europe, a lot of business schools are actually running programs for 10 months. So it's no more a 2-year kind of a format. It's a 10-month plus internship, a very intensive 10-month plus, a lot of very practical work outside the curriculum in a certain way. That kind of a packaging. How do we make sure that there is a 10-month program and then there is an immersion program thereafter for maybe about 2 months or 4 months or 5 months, whatever is the model that the business schools are trying to work out. So in other words, the curriculum itself is quite agile, and there is a certain type of an emphasis on what type of work they will do so that they become employable later. So the whole curriculum concept itself has changed. And there are new age courses in the curriculum. The sustainability, ESG, climate related courses have become mainstream.
Yeah.
And then you have also internships in these domains. When they get into, after the 10-month program, they have a 6-month module, let's say, and in the 6 months they're actually working in a company addressing climate related problems and things like that. So in other words, how do you make sure that enough practice is ingrained into the MBA program that is going to determine how successful careers are going to be for MBA graduates? And we are also trying to work. In fact, last year when we did the formulation of the curriculum, what we did was we actually increased the internship program to 3 months. So after the first year, there was about 6 weeks internship that we changed into a 3-month internship. That's like about 12 weeks. So we've increased the internship period, but we are also thinking about how do we make sure that there are more practical components, more immersion components in the program, so that they get a fair understanding about the complexities of real world problem solving.
Yes, and that will really help because the MBA in SRM itself has so many different branches, like you had mentioned. But speaking of the MBA, so I got a little catch in my mind right now. A few days back, when I was just scrolling internet, I saw SRM has this highlight program of online MBA, especially post COVID, post the world going after the pandemic. I think digitalization has become very, very common. But do you think the online MBA course, not just in SRM but anywhere else, is that equivalent to having a regular traditional MBA degree, or where do you think that stands?
So in other words, we also have an online MBA program, a full-fledged online MBA program. There are a lot of other universities which got into the online skilling. Online skilling is going to be there. I mean, you can never possibly do away with online education. In fact, these are mainstream degrees, but there are others who are actually giving you micro credits. In other words, let's say if you have 18 courses in MBA, okay, and as a collection it becomes a degree. But let's say if you don't want to take all 18 courses and you just want to take 3-4 courses in marketing and one in climate and things like that, that's possible now. A whole lot of online edutech companies are trying to give you very a reduced, condensed coursework so that you get a quick skill. That is also happening. So for us, actually, what we think is the offline education is going to be there with a fair amount of online component, in the sense that the future of MBA education is going to be a blended learning kind of a format with a whole lot of micro credits. So in other words, let's say can you do an entire course on climate, or do you need to have an entire course? When I say an entire course, that's like a 60-hour full course. Or is it possible to do a 4-hour climate course? And then you still give a sort of a fairly, a deeper skills in 4 hours, so that they have the practical components covered fully, and then they don't really have to do a 60-hour course. So, in other words, people are trying to experiment with micro credits and full courses and also some online courses. We also have a blend of all the three, and online education is a completely different thing. So if you want to do a full-time program, the experience is going to be different. But let's say if you are already working in a company and you don't really have that kind of an investment possible for you to go for a full-time 2-year program, then online is the right solution for you. But let's say if you have time to actually skill yourself, a full-time program is a much better this thing, which gives you advantage of all the three, in the sense that micro credits, you get a certain online type of components. You also have a full-fledged, offline courses available for you. So it is basically about people who have a certain type of a context. Managers who are already working, I think online is the best. But let's say if somebody can take a 2-year break from their companies, offline is the better solution.
I think SRM has aced both the online and the offline things, so kudos to the entire team for doing that. Speaking of just the course, sir, another quick, tricky question for you again. We spoke about the aesthetics in the legal curriculum. Do you think any aesthetic requirements should be there in the business curriculum as well? If yes, what is it?
So actually, there are a lot of courses which are sort of blended in a certain way. For instance, literature is one of the courses that get taught in business schools. A lot of people may not know it. There are leadership through literature is one of the popular course in some business schools. So in other words, some of the aesthetic components have already come into business education. See, unlike a science program, let's say a physics program, business education is actually a collection of topics from various streams.
Altogether, yes.
It's actually a multidisciplinary kind of a program structured to make sure that we prepare future managers in a certain way, and it was needed at a certain in a certain context in the yesteryears, but right now also we need it. So that's why what happened was every business school tried to basically bring in elements in the business program. So aesthetics already entered in a certain way in business education.
Yes, and I think that's the aesthetic now for just being out there and just making sure that business curriculum is going great. So awesome getting those thoughts from you, sir. We'll have a few more closing thoughts from you before we end the entire conversation. I'm sure whenever any course or anything happens, we have industry members coming in to speak. We have different professionals coming in to speak. So what role do you think these alumni or industry professionals lead when they come to speak at guest lectures in colleges and business schools?
It's a very important component, in the sense that while an instructor, a business educator, can give you a much broader perspective and much broader skilling kind of a thing within the course, but they no business instructor will be agile enough to actually address the real world problems as they are faced by the managers, right?
Yes.
So that's why when you bring a guest lecturer, a visiting professor from the industry, and when they speak, they're actually talking about their current problems, and but the problems that don't exist in a textbook, or are not part of any case as of now. Now those things actually enter the classroom, which is the need of the hour in a certain way, right? Why don't you make the footballer speak about football? Okay. Similarly, why don't you make the managers speak about the management dilemmas? So when they actually speak in these guest sessions, the students get to understand very practical problems and very current problems. So that's why it's very, very important to bring in that element in the business education. And it happens quite often in all business schools, especially at SRM. We emphasize this interaction continuously.
Yes, and that's proving to be good for the students as well.
Absolutely.
So great initiative by all those business schools. I'm going to steal some knowledge from you right now at this moment, sir. So please do help us with your knowledge. So in the final year, MBA students do a business project. So according to you, what is one best example of a business project that you would want to give to the students to tell them that in this high, fast pressured world, what is that one business idea that would succeed? Any thoughts from your end, sir?
So the business project was something that was necessary in every business curriculum, because if you have to impart researching skills for the MBA graduates, business project was one of the key tools for making sure that they do some independent work. Study the problem independently, collect data, come up with a certain solution framework, so that and it is also presented so that it is tested whether if you present it before the class, what happens is somebody will ask you some question, and you will test your solution in a certain way, and that type of a thing was already happening in a certain way. But now actually business projects, there are. I'll give you an example. There are some business schools which are experimenting with something called a field project. So in other words, you will do an year-long project, not just a 3-month project or a 1-month project or a end semester project kind of a thing. You will actually work with one problem the entire year, and you keep on collecting data, trying to find some solution, discuss with professor, and till at the end of the year you have substantially solved a problem, and then there is a certain impact also created. So in other words, I'm telling you, a lot of innovation is happening, and their business schools actually want to see whether their students are making that impactful decision or not. And it is like an evaluated program with a certain structure.
Yes.
And so in other words, there is innovation in project also now.
Yes. These are tips coming from someone best in business, so make sure you do take these tips and make sure you have the best project, because sir truly gave us some good knowledge from his end. Final closing question, sir, before we call this a day. So a fun question, I had a question. So if you had the opportunity to redesign the MBA course, what would be the first thing that you would change? That if this changes, that's what I want it to look like. What is that one change, sir?
So there'll be several changes actually, to be very honest. And curriculum is something that excites me a lot. So firstly, I'd like to actually think about much more agile programs than sort of 2-year format. Maybe we should think about a 15-month or a 12-month kind of a program rather than a 2-year kind of a this thing. And there are some courses that actually can become micro credits rather than a full course. For instance, we have, let's say, we have managerial economics. Now, managerial economics can be a microcredit offered outside the curriculum, but with an emphasis of monetary economics. So, in other words, monetary economics could be taught in the program, but much of economics can actually become a sort of a credit outside this thing, and they can pick up that credit while they're studying. It need not necessarily in a rigorous classroom kind of this thing. So there are certain optimization type of things that are possible, because if you want to make it an agile program, you can't teach 50 different courses, and it's not possible to actually accommodate all the courses. So you have to give way to some courses as microcredits, and they can be quickly sort of done through an online program or something like that. And then while you emphasize certain other things inside the classroom.
Yes, we really hope that these changes do come so that we have more dynamic business leaders coming up. So, you know how students have been doing projects to, make sure that they stand out there in the current business field. The undergraduate research thing that we do, like, I think that's a very, very interesting thing that we should be doing. So, what's your take on what do you think is the best part of the undergraduate research project?
So, one of the key things that you have to understand is whether somebody has research aptitude. The discovery process is actually a very non-linear process as of now. Somebody actually does an undergrad program, then a post-graduation program, thereafter some MPhil because they got interested in some research related topic, and thereafter they do get into a PhD program, because they fully realize that now research is something that I want to do. Now, if you have that kind of a model, it is actually quite a delayed type of this thing. How do you make sure that you discover research aptitude early on? Now, that is possible if you inculcate researching skills in the undergraduate program itself. And actually, now that we have a 4-year undergraduate program, there is a scope for actually training undergraduate students for serious research skills. How do you build serious research skills? So you can actually have a research methodology course specific to a certain subject, and make sure that they actually write research papers by the end of the year and publish them. They become quite rigorous academic work. And now that is happening in some of our courses already. In engineering, some of our engineering students are actually getting into a research project, and which culminates into an academic publication at the end of the year in a certain way. Now that kind of a thing we are introducing in all undergrad programs, and especially in even management courses like BBA. And we want our students to discover their research capabilities early on, and make sure that if they actually think that research is something that excites them, they can actually immediately get into a research full-fledged PhD program thereafter, immediately after their undergrad. And that possibility of making sure that that career outcome happens, we are getting into structuring research based programs in our undergrad programs, all undergrad programs, and even BBA.
And it's good that we're starting right from the UG as well, because like you were mentioning, it starts off small, but then those ideas can grow to become something really big. So
Yeah, yeah. And then because you have time for the whole year,
yeah.
you can actually publish a paper towards the end of the year because you are working with a professor and that is, progressing in a certain way. And then that becomes a seriously rigorous academic work suitable for publication. So
Yes.
that now happening and in engineering, and that is now going to also happen in our BBA programs.
Yes. Definitely a good going, I would say so. Yes.
Absolutely.
So with that, it's a wrap to this, I think, 45-minute intense conversation on so many things that we spoke about. Thank you so much once again, sir, for
Thank,
giving us your time for Times conversation. I would say we had a great talk. Thank you so much once again.
Thank
Awesome
you.
talking
Thank
to
you
you.
very much. Thank you, Times Conversation. Thank you to all the Times, team members. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much.